Jai Bhim. Good morning to one and all. Your Lordship Justice Patel, Professor Sukumar Sir, Professor Ludnathan, I'm Cynthia Ma'am, and Scholar Senior Journalist Mr. Mitra, Convener Dr. Lakshmanan, my learned colleagues and dear friends. I'm so happy to be here. It's an honor and privilege to be here this morning. When Dr. Lakshmanan asked me whether I can speak about caste pride in this event, I was so overwhelmed actually. Because I like the book so much. In fact, that's what I wrote on a Facebook page note also. I was literally crying at many places when reading that book, looking at the kind of work many of our leaders have done, both Dalit and non-Dalits, over past 2 centuries or so. This is a historical record actually, honestly. There were other books also, a lot of academic books. But what makes this book very important is it's at once scholarly and eminently readable. I can promise you, if you take that book, you will not keep that book without finishing reading that. This is a very important book that we should all read up. And we were also discussing about very interesting personalities that he has introduced. And many of us are aware of many of the Dalit activists, many leaders, but the few other people who have done immense contribution, who has made immense contribution, but we are not aware of them. One is Mr. Veerayya. I'll be talking about them also. This is the book. And I was also showing him, this is the most, underlined book in my shelf. I do read, but may not be a lot, but last few years, couple of years, I was, my work is not allowing me to read a lot of academic works, but this is one important book I think, you should all read. Now I'll just go to the review. I'll take just 10-15 minutes maximum. I think that's the time allotted to me. If you just look at the book, the title itself, that's what my opinion, because when I bought this book, I did not read any review, or I was not aware what this book was about. So, one thing you can be sure is it's not an anthropology study. There's a lot of anthropological study that has happened in the past 50 years or so, mainly dependent on the colonial archives. Even, this book also takes some information from the colonial archives, but it's not completely that. And it is a sweeping account of the battles that were fought the last 200 years on the streets, in legislatures and courts to mitigate the evil effect of caste on a vast majority of Hindus. It is neither a polemical work on false caste pride. It is also a portrait of selfless men and women who fought for equality and justice, and of men who fought on the other side of the battle. It makes it a point to identify them for us, many of them whom we think are actually social reformers, but in actuality they are not. Another cursory glance at the book may make one to think it is yet another addition to the list of books based on colonial archives. Though the book seeks the assistance of colonial archives for its purpose, it goes beyond that for most part. Some of it is to untouched sources, at least for a work under this rubric, like quotes. There are actually books, for example, a very important book called Transformative Constitution by Gautam Bhatia, and other legal scholars who have come out of the National Law School in recent times. There are, a dozen books that has come out in recent times that based on the court judgments. This book takes assistance of colonial archives, but also seeks input from the important court cases that has happened in the past 200 years or so, and private correspondence, writings and speeches, and national and international news reports. I was surprised that many of the references that he takes is from the Time, Guardian, and other newspapers of the time. So that kind of research that has gone into writing this book. It turns a spotlight on men who made immense contribution but have not been given that due, and on false heroes too. And the premise of the book is very simple. It's a theme-based chapters. Chapters are based on certain themes. It is a detailed account of the legal milestones, particularly milestones reached in the past 2 centuries in the long run towards equality in an essentially unequal Hindu society. To do that, book is divided into 5 different themes. The first is on the discriminatory laws. Then second is the treatment of majority and the power of Brahmins to recognize and de-recognize. Barriers to access public spaces, how the barriers were broken, temple entry, violence on Dalits. Rightly speaking, because you're all scholars here and academicians here, most of you, you would have found the books on each of these themes separately. And I can think of many books. Okay, maybe the Pariah problem, Rupa Vishwanath, it covers a certain portion. And, there is another book, Nandana's Children. It also covers a certain portion, at least in the Madras Presidency. And there are many books in Tamil. For example, Ko Raghupathi's book, in Tamil we have a book called Podu Urumai Poratam. even that book also talks about Kalpathi's struggle, which is there, given in detail in this book. But this book travels all this path and gives you a proper account. But we are aware the colonial administration, if not in its entirety, was sympathetic to the problem faced by Dalits. It also did not want to antagonize a socially powerful upper caste, and therefore let the status quo prevail. Their promise of equal treatment was mostly on paper, and sometimes the law itself was designed to be discriminatory. Take for instance, the legal force that customs, usage, and tradition enjoyed in the Indian courts before the Constitution. Another important thing which I and my other friends used to talk about, the customs we think, are not pan-India. Customs, usage, and tradition, many of them are very, very localized. What we find in a small, area of 40, 60 square kilometer area, we may not find outside that particular area. So this book actually points at those things out. Particularly, a very important case, most of us should actually read the Ramnath inheritance case of 1868. There's a detailed account of that, how the Privy Council for the first time held the Hindu system of law, of course, clear proof of usage will outpace the written law itself. So, when Privy Council or the courts are called upon to adjudicate, it actually looks into the local custom and usage in a particular area to adjudicate the particular matter. So, another important thing is throughout the book, you will find, most of them are Dalit activists, Dalit leaders. Not only them, the struggles and, what should I say, which they undertook has some history, at least. I'm not sure, maybe this is my opinion. Most of the material are from the Madras presidency. It does cover, it does justice to other presidents as well, like, Bombay presidency and other northern aspects. But most of the material are from the Madras presidency. That's for one simple reason. For 250, 300 years, the Dalits in Madras presidency, took law very seriously. The moment, they became aware there's a law which treats everyone equally, and at least they're equal before law. Even the law doesn't treat them equally, there is a law that is common for all castes. Then moment they immediately took up to petitioning, approaching courts of law. Sometime back I found the Pariahs of Madras. A church is built on their land. There's a Portuguese church just opposite to Stanley Medical College. It is on their land. And they for long, they enjoyed, administering the church. Suddenly, it was transferred to the, Mylapore, Bishop Archdiocese of Mylapore, which is just across the road. Then they petitioned the King of Portuguese, said, we built this church, it is on our land, we should have the right to appoint, the visa to the church. So it went to the court also. So that kind of, far-sightedness many of the Dalit activists of the time had. And another important thing which I accidentally came across was in 1816 there was a law, a Madras law, which actually discriminated while prescribing punishment. There was a punishment for Dalits and the punishment for the rest. For example, one important section is section 10 of the 1816 law, which the learned author cites, which prescribed punishment for very, very petty offences, which gave right to local panchayat leader, where he can put the Dalits in stocks. Then I went and searched to find out what this stock actually means. You're locked, your hands and legs are locked, and you're kept outside in the sun, hot sun. He has to be there for 12 hours continuously throughout the day for the same offense. Whereas the others, non-Dalits, they kept in a room or something for 4 hours to 6 hours. So this kind of different treatment was accorded. And it took 103 years for that particular section to be repealed. And again, this is what these things we come to know from the book. And another thing which the book highlights is how perverse the caste system was. As simple as this, concerning the human dignity, was always the first casualty. It can be seen in the way Nadar women were forced to not to cover their shoulders. The book reminds us, conservatives thwarted every attempt by the British administrators and reformers to abrogate the regressive custom that was repugnant to public decency and morals. At the forefront of the opposition camp against reform was Madhav Rao. Madhav Rao is actually celebrated as a very able administrator. He has written very important books on administration, but he has another side. So this book captures that. It was not only the celebrated as such, and there are other people whom we have, knowingly or unknowingly have celebrated, like Motilal Nehru, S.N. Banerjee, who was involved in the Congress, Madan Mohan Malaviya, V.V. Giri. And the V.V. Giri case is very interesting case. And Kadju, Kadju family actually, they were Supreme Court judges for 3 generations at least. He makes it a point, what are the things these guys did, in the path to justice and equality. And Manoj, like a trained lawyer, dissects the shameful defense put forward by Motilal Nehru while defending the perpetrators of Sati. That's an important case in the Allahabad High Court. The senior Nehru had argued the accused did everything from procuring firewood to ghee, but the fire lit itself because of divine intervention. They burnt a widow, but the defense put forward with the Brahmins of the particular place was, we did everything. We procured the wood, we procured the ghee, did everything, but we found the fire lit itself, automatic combustion, which he calls theory of spontaneous combustion. Thankfully, the court did not accept that kind of an argument. But lest we consider Motilal Nehru would have done this when he was still young and amateurish. He was actually very, very active and thick in midst of politics at the time. He was representing, he was a member of the Uttar Pradesh Legislative Council at the point in time. So we cannot actually give him any benefit of doubt. And the book does not catalog individual events in support of each theme. Rather, each chapter is methodically structured. The problem is identified, the protagonist introduced, how the protagonist moved the pieces to achieve the purpose is detailed, along with the debates that happened around it, and does not stop there. The book traces, that this is the most important thing which I found. The book traces the entire arc from the first step in the colonial period to the current position in the post-colonial, that is the constitutional era. What has happened to it? Maybe one important example could be the impunity to violence. What has happened in the colonial era and what has happened in the post-colonial era, how it was approached. Another example could be, as the learned Honorable Justice talked about Chhatrapati Shivaji. There's an important thing which I learned completely new on this. And I was aware. He says, Brahmins held the key to the twice born status of the other two elite Varnas. Even Ambedkar says, which it is quoted in the book, Brahmins claimed the power to do and undo the status of any Hindu at any time. We all know that Brahmins refused to perform the investiture ceremony for Shivaji's coronation as he was a Shudra. Therefore, he had to bring the Brahmins from Kasi. What is not known, at least to me, was this issue had lingered on till the early part of the 20th century. And this issue went on for 300 years, 250 years, whether whether Shivaji was a Sudra or a Kshatriya, because most of the laws that came before the uniform, the Hindu law, were designed differently for each Varna. In an inheritance dispute involving Shivaji's half-brother descendants in Tanjore and Tamil Nadu, the Madras High Court was called upon to adjudicate on the Varna status of Shivaji and his half-brother. Long centuries later after they were dead. That was the power of these more or less written laws, the tradition customs which we're talking about, that were totally dependent on Brahmins for the interpretation. Author rightly says, the sovereignty of Brahmin continued even after the Battle of Bhim Goregaon. Yet another important feature of the book is a selection of exemplary cases to shows a position of issue under consideration. One very interesting case was that concerning the outcome of former President V.V. Giri's 1951 election. He lost the election to a scheduled tribe candidate. In the election petition, after he lost, he approached the High Court and he, claimed the winner is no longer a scheduled tribe because he is now a Kshatriya, because the Hindu scriptures allowed individuals to rise to a higher caste. Reservation is given to scheduled caste and scheduled tribe. How Brahmins think, what are the ingenious argument they can actually come up with to, overcome that thing. The question before the court was whether a member of a scheduled caste or scheduled tribe can by his own act transform himself to a different higher caste. Thankfully, the court with good sense rejected this ingenious argument from Giri. The book introduces two characters whom many of us may not be aware of. At least this is the first time I came across that name. Manakji Bairamji Dadabai, a Parsi, and Veerayan. At least Rupa mentions Veerayan, and the one or two references of Veerayan here and there. I learned of the very important contribution of Sir Dadabai from this book. Manoj calls him India's John Quincy Adams, someone who broke the silence in the legislature on untouchability. So 1916 was the first time untouchability was spoken inside any legislature in India. Before that, none of them, they didn't take that very seriously. Even though there's some social movements, at least in the Madras presidency, Adi Dravidas organized themselves at least from 1868 onwards, 1860s onwards, and there were protests outside, and the Rettamala Srinivasan petitioned the British government directly. He had organized long march having about with 4,000 people in tow, where he petitioned the governor of Madras regarding all these things. But for the first time, it was spoken inside a legislature. It was in 1916. His speech, actually, I went through the speech. Speech in the Imperial Legislative is a must read for all of us, actually. How important that speech was. It was his interventions that set off a chain of events across India. The colonial government began compiling statistical information on scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, their social economic status, etc. The imperial government advised the provinces to take steps to ameliorate the condition of SCs and STs. This gentleman, Dadabhai, is still not recognized. Thankfully, the perceptive Ambedkar refers to him at two places. That is the beauty of Ambedkar. He never misses anything. Sometimes he used to be, completely surprised from where on, he takes all these things, where he finds time. Most MBA graduates would know, very important management guru we call Drucker. Ambedkar has read Drucker. By accident, I came across this name in Ambedkar's writing. I was shocked. Before 1956, Peter Drucker was completely unknown. But this gentleman, Ambedkar, has bought his book from somewhere and has read Drucker. Okay. Thankfully, Ambedkar refers to him at two places when speaking about the men who espouse the cause of untouchables. As a penetrative observer, Manoj also points out the case of mistaken identity with regards to Manekji Dadabhai. This is an important thing which we should note. In Ambedkar's collected works, the editors wrongly identify him as Dadabhai Naoroji, whereas this is another Dadabhai, whereas he has been referred to as another Dadabhai Naoroji in the collected works. The editors in a footnote have mentioned this should be Dadabhai Naoroji, whom Ambedkar is referring to, but that's not the case. In fact, this mistake is repeated further down, and Gail Ahmed's book also referred to it. So that means Manoj has gone through the entire 17,000 pages of Ambedkar and also Gail Ahmed's book to come up with something like that. I'm really touched by that thing, sir. The chapter on Veerayan is like a movie script. This I was talking to many friends. Stalin, who is here, he suddenly called me. We regularly talk. On that day, he called me. I was literally crying on the phone. Then he told me, maybe it's a problem. He said, okay, ma, I'll call you later. Then I told him, I'm reading a book on where a chapter on Veerayan appears. Somewhere down the line, we have lost men like him. He just, was in the legislative council for 3 years. But the kind of work he did, it is completely captured in this book. Really, it's like a movie script. Most of our friends are movie, cinema directors and things. They should actually take it up. When I was reading these lines, immediately I put this on the Facebook page also. You look at this. No one, literally I collapsed on this line. I would be committing a grave sin against a divine law, and the sin from which there is no escape for me if I do not press the claims of my community. So he says in the Legislative Council, when there was an argument, he stands up, he says, I would be committing a grave sin against the divine law if I don't put forth the views of my community. That is the only purpose I'm here, no other purpose. I'm not bothered about what happens outside India, what happens there, here and there, about others. My only purpose is this. Somewhere down the line, we lost everything. The purpose we have gathered here to talk about the violence. It's because we literally lack people of the leaders of that stature. That is something we should all be worried about, and I'll still leave you to ponder upon that. Okay. And another important thing is this year, 2024, is the centenary year of the 1924 resolution. Rettamala Srinivasan brought a resolution in the Madras Legislative Council in 1924, which says all public places, roads, everything will be open to public from now on. No one, Dalits or anyone, no one should be stopped. That's a very important resolution, which he calls, Manoj calls it, equivalent of Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation. This is a centenary year we have gathered here, and we should, throughout the year, I think we should celebrate that particular resolution, organize conferences, organize events, so that people are made aware what sacrifice these people have done. For example, I wanted to compare it with the Vaikom struggle. Same period, 1924, exactly a couple of weeks before Vaikom struggle, we perceptibly compares them, identifies them. I was also not aware. We all know 9 to Vaikam struggle, these things, but the timeline completely misses the thing. Exactly a few months before this, Veerayan walked into a Agraharam in Salem. From there, this motion was set on. This chain of events started for this resolution. Same period, Vaikam struggle happened. But around Vaikam struggle, there are multiple books. So many books around that, so many things. 2 governments are organizing the centenary year to celebrate Vaikam struggle. Vaikam struggle was not a struggle meant to enter the temple as many people think. It was meant to enter the street up to a point. Maximum 50 meters. That was a struggle. It went on for 3 years. To gain entry to 50 to 100 meters. That event is celebrated, marked both 2 state governments, the state of Tamil Nadu and state of Kerala are celebrating it. This is an important thing. I'm not blaming it. But far more important struggle happened during the time. A struggle, which sought basic community, very, very fundamental human necessities like water, procuring water from a public well, from a public tank, walking across a tank. This gentleman in the MLC wanted to go to a post office. He was not allowed to enter that road. So, those things somewhere we missed. So, this GO 2660, towards centenary year, we are standing here. And this, Ambedkar's role, the cause of many of these struggles are highlighted throughout the book, particularly is like a forgotten bill on temple entry. There is no reference on this bill anywhere. So, this is the first time Manoj has unearthed this particular fact, where, we talks about the bill, the original, bill, law for temple entry was framed by Ambedkar. Okay, and his posthumous vindication in criminalizing untouchability. This is again the centenary year of Velayya Perumal, who drafted the law for criminalizing untouchability. The fire originated with Ambedkar on that, and a stellar role in framing the constitution. I'm reminded, at least many of us should be also to remind yourself, book is eternal reminder of our past and justifies the appellation given to our constitution, a transformative constitution. It literally transformed. On a single date, it cut off everything from the past. Now we, individual is coming to the forefront. Earlier only we had group rights. Every caste had their own rights. Every community had rights. There was no rights for individuals. We only had responsibilities and duties to the society, nothing else. On a date, on an appointed date, we all had rights. This is completely new to India. For the past 2000 years, the first time someone thought about this, the most important thing, where the man comes, the individual comes to the forefront. And finally, the book ends on a somber note that even after 200 days of struggle for equality, the violence against Dalits has not abated. Dalits face violence every day. The reason we have gathered here today, nothing has changed. Keel Venmani, Sundru, Kairlanje happen every day. He records all these things. In this so-called progressive state, which I want to bring it to your attention, this is called as a progressive state. Learned justice also referred to it. It has been more than a year since human feces, physical material, was found mixed in with drinking water meant for Dalit residential quarters. It's been more than 365 days now, more than 370 days. Since it was found, human fecal matter was being mixed in a water tank meant for Dalit quarters, and still the government has not made any effort to find who were the perpetrators of justice. No justice was brought to them. So this is the situation in Tamil Nadu. Reading histories like this makes one wonder where we have gone wrong. I leave it to you. One area which I thought the book should have covered is the social and religious movements against lower caste. Essentially, I'm aware that it is beyond the scope of the book, because the book is mostly the legal milestones that were achieved in against caste. The Adi Dravida movement in Madras, the Adi Andhra movement in Andhra, and the Adidam movement in the north, Namasudra movement in the east. Then the Tamil Buddhism movement started by Ayodhyadas here. Then there was Narayana Guru, Ayyan Kali, Ayyavali, etc. And the role of Christian missionaries. Maybe, we'll look forward for another book from you, sir, covering all these things. Finally, I thank Mr. Mitta for this amazing book. As I told you, this is an eminently rated book. And thank you again, sir. Thanks again. Thank you, my friend.